this is an accountant exercise before it's a technology exercise. If I ran this AI workload in the cloud, what would that cost me? If I had to procure the hardware and assemble it and support it and roll my own, what would that cost me? I do believe that hybrid will probably be the approach moving forward.
From the skillfully crafted and colorful and glowing studio of the Cloud Gambit podcast, this is your host, William. And with me, my co-host, the universally acclaimed, deep-thinking, philosophically brilliant Yvonne Sharp. How are you doing today, Yvonne?
You're gonna have to dial it back a little bit because you're gonna run out of superlatives.
Never.
I may just create a random accolade generator, and we can use that every recording. That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, that would make me not have to think as hard, and give us a little more variety, maybe.
Sounds like a great use of AI.
I'm going to have to put all these together in a single video and just release it to YouTube after a year. That's a good idea. I'm going to make a note of that. Okay. And also with us, hailing from the frigid depths of Canada, where hockey is as common as taking a walk in the park, is a returning guest. AI and automation enthusiast, author, content creator, and just really an overall awesome person, John Capobianco. Welcome back on the show, John. How are things going for you in 2024?
Oh, things have been very change heavy for me this year, but I'm doing so well. I'm so happy to meet Yvonne digitally in person for the first time and to be back on your show and to see the growth of your platform and how successful you both have been. I'm really excited to be here today. And things have never been better. The world of AI, sometimes you latch onto something new and you're not sure if it's a bubble or if it's hype or if the hype cycle wears off or if even just general boredom. I've done it for a couple of years. Maybe I get tired of it. Every week there's some new approach or some new tool or some new thing to play with. So no, I'm very good. I'm very creative. I'm very productive, and I'm very happy. I think that's the most important thing.
That's amazing. Before we dive into the AI conversation, just want to talk about some things that came up in the community a few months ago. So John, you were, at least I know I heard it from you. You were responsible to deliver the sad news of Nick Russo's passing and deliver that to the community. And I know you and I spoke, we chatted after that, and wanted to take a minute just to kind of talk through his influence and what he's meant to all of us, and give a little shout out to Nick.
Well, I wanted to make sure that we did this today, and that because of our mutual connection with Nick, someone reached out, someone who was close to the family reached out on LinkedIn and asked if they were looking for ways to get a hold of Nick's leadership at Cisco, but also to let me know and to have me inform the community as tactfully as I could. Before I get into the history of Nick, I think he was a digital renaissance man. That is how I would classify Nick. He was, like a Da Vinci, a painter, an artist, a philosopher, an architect, an engineer. He was so talented in so many different areas. We became friends digitally 10 years ago. He was really supportive of my early network automation work and my first book that I published, and he was always there to, add his own unique perspective, And he influenced me in many ways. I wanted to become a content creator. I wanted to become an educator or a trainer or someone who helped teach and coach other people. And who better to learn from and to be mentored on that journey than someone who really seemed to have done it all in the industry.
Yeah, well, one of the things that stood out to me, and I was able to make it up to Maryland for one of his memorial services, but he similar story on my part. I really got to know him when I was doing Network Collective. You know, we had him on several times to talk about. I mean, I remember his EIGRP series was off the chain, and he came on to talk about segment routing and BGP policy and so many things. But we talked frequently. I don't think I realized the scope of and the depth of his relationships across the community. How many people had reached out to him for help or information or peer review. The people that he looked to also for peer review, and I think it's a reminder that we only see a small portion of folks' total existence, and he really was a phenomenal community contributor. But also, he and I talked a lot about family and parenthood and politics, and you know, and I don't think we often see that side of our peers. But he was just a friend and a phenomenal person, and you know, there's not a week that goes by that I don't think, oh, I would, you know, just, oh, I should talk to Nick about this.
I
And
know.
it's like, you know, that fresh grief. And I think, you know, that will be, you know, our experience, I think, from now on. But he really was you know, just a phenomenal human and a great contributor to our community.
Yeah, I had a calendar meeting scheduled with him for the day after he passed. Like we were very much in communication on a daily or every couple days because of his interest in artificial intelligence. He actually sent me, this is classic Nick. He sends me a random PowerPoint on WebEx while I was at Cisco. Could you take a look at this and make sure that I've captured everything? And it was like a 30-page PowerPoint that was incredible of my work. He had gone in and found my repos and my videos and my transcripts and my code and put it all together for him and his team to learn about artificial intelligence. And then we just really started to click even more so than we had in the past 10 years about network automation or whatever. Artificial intelligence, and I'm not sure if you look at his Twitter over the weeks leading up to his passing, he's doing calculations and mathematical equations and like a very deeper step than anything I've done. I would consider, you know, I was at the programming Python level. He moved into the calculus level of the artificial intelligence. You know, and he would send me things. What do you think of this? I mean, I really don't know, Nick. I don't have the mathematical chops to assess your work. Like I wish I could help you, but I have no idea, right?
Yeah.
He went that deep in so many areas too. I know you both knew him at a much deeper level than I did. I had a few interactions with him, one of which was a funny sort of debate on video editors, and we did a screen sharing, and he definitely proved me wrong. So I was using a pretty heavy duty video editor, and he was just like, "Look, everything you're doing right there, you can actually do in Camtasia." And I was like, "Nah, no, you can't. No way." And so we did a screen sharing, and he took me through his process, and it was absolutely amazing. It actually set me up in, you know, putting these episodes together and how I organize things. That conversation actually had a lot of tidbits as to why I do some of the things the way I do with the way that I plan the podcast out. And so just little interactions like that, and knowing why he's taking that time with me, he's pumping out some of the deepest content around networking, around automation, and then as you were saying, getting into AI at like a nuts and bolts level, as deep as you can go. And he was pumping out courses like crazy on top of all the other stuff he was doing on top of his day job. Just absolutely amazing.
Yeah, I think one of the things and what enabled him to do that is that he was a maniacal system creator. right? So he had a series of personal systems that he created that worked for him. He ran his life with a Kanban board, and he had a schedule and he kept that schedule, and he showed up every day and just kept doing the work. And I think I learned a lot by watching him, and that level of rigor isn't for everybody. But what he was able to accomplish was incredible, and to do it while being so generous with his time. Because I imagine that conversation that you had with him, William, has saved you hours, maybe weeks of time,
Yep.
in the couple years since it happened, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And what I always admired and respected the most was you could, if you were respectful, obviously, you could disagree with his position. And he was an open mind who would consider your input or feedback or thoughts and really consider it meaningfully and either adjust his position or justify his original position or even back down from his original position and change his mind. I know on the maniacal creator part, I don't know if we did it to each other on purpose, but if he would make a new Postman collection, and he's very famous for his Postman collections. If you are looking for Postman collections for networking, look up Nick Russo Postman collections. It's similar to his TCP and PCAP projects that he worked on. I mean, a real digital renaissance man. But we he would say, "Here's a new Postman collection. Go ahead and make your mind maps." So I'd go ahead and make all these mind maps and stuff, and then I would find something and say, "Hey, I noticed you don't have a GNMI thing for iOS XE yet, right?" So then within 3 or 4 days, there would be a GNMI receiver for iOS XE or whatever, right? So we would ping pong back and forth on each other's mania and compulsion to create, right? And I just one thing that really stands out, and I'll regret never getting this photo. I will for the rest of my life. He got a big kick out of my stupid smiley face selfies at Cisco Live. And he said to me, he goes, "One day I'm going to mean mug. I'm going to put on the meanest face I can right beside your big smiley face. That's the selfie that I want," right? And we laughed about that all the time. We were going to get that at Cisco Live, but unfortunately, he passed away before we could do that. I really miss him. I really do miss his contributions, his friendship, his insight, and he really was a good friend to me.
Yep. The only other anecdote I'll share, I was talking to a mutual friend at his service, and he said, he shared some of his early work, on the AI stuff with me. And he's like, the first draft, he's like, it wasn't any better than anything any of the rest of us create, right? He's like, he just kept iterating until he got it where he wanted it to be. And I think that's an important lesson for the rest of us too, is to start and keep iterating.
Yeah, he definitely left. I mean, he left network engineering as a discipline, technology, infrastructure, the community. He left it in a much better place. His
100%.
contributions are going to be felt for, forever, for a very long time. Yeah. So I guess we can pivot to the more technical stuff now. We're going to grill John on all the AI things. I guess so. One thing that's really cool. So you, cool, I guess, depending on how you look at it and what side, but you recently left Cisco and you're now at a network startup, one that I'm pretty familiar with, Selector.ai. So first of all, how are things, going with the transition?
Things are going very well. There's a bit of a fire hose effect. I have a lot to take in, but I have my own instance set up. I'm knee deep in demos and PowerPoints and the technical aspects of it. I've already made a few videos evangelizing it. We have a webinar coming up at the end of the month on LinkedIn. I've really enjoyed it. Now, it is a very different pace at a startup and a very different culture, very different expectations, even motivations than Cisco. So there is a bit of a cultural shift here, right? But I'm very happy and very excited that I've made the move. I have no regrets. I'm working with, I believe, to be revolutionary technology. That was really what drew me to Selector, was the fact that they have a network language model. I'm calling it an NLM instead of an LLM. Um, Down to things like the Copilot. So for like 2 years, my goal personally has been to try to make little applications or little tools, Streamlit apps, Python code that let you talk to your network in human language. Just, what is the IP address of loopback 0? Are all my interfaces up? What are the names of my access lists? Things like this, right? And using natural language and artificial intelligence and Gen AI and machine learning to try to make that work. And I've had varying degrees of success, but not at the scale of an enterprise solution. I was telling you, William, before I joined Selector about a year ago, Jeremy Schulman from Major League Baseball sent me a video from Selector, and it was like a Hello World video. It was only about a minute long. And I felt like the Beach Boys when they heard Sgt. Pepper's by the Beatles. I was like, everything I've been doing for the last 2 years has been like fun and cool and neat, but a complete waste of time. Like, there's actually a company who's built a solution that does what I've had in my mind for the last 2 years. So that started to eat away at the back of my brain. The Selector's doing what you want to do, but much, much better. And Cisco wasn't necessarily pursuing that path, let's say. They are incorporating AI and they have their own AI initiatives and stuff, but it's very different. It's quite different from a startup with a very narrow pinhole focus on machine learning and AI for AI ops, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I'll just jump in and add here. Cisco has been very strategically successful as a second mover, right? They let the startup ecosystem work. They let them go out and incubate ideas, get product market fit, and then they find the ones that make the most sense for Cisco and their business, and they acquire them, and then they incorporate that technology into their platform. We've seen that with SD-WAN. We saw that with UCS. Like that's their model.
Right.
And I think at the size that they are, it makes a lot of sense. They've been phenomenally successful with that approach.
Being agile, like the smaller you are, the more agile you are, the big. I mean, it's kind of like, Cisco, you can think of this gigantic barge. Well, turning a big barge around is kind of hard. But if you're in a kayak, you flip around real quick and you're going the other way. And I think that what was interesting to me about Selector, it's kind of like the AI ops and observability version of what, we do at Alkira, which is why I kind of latched on and I was following them earlier on, where your product is kind of like designed to work with various sources. Like you have on premises, you have multi-cloud, you have hybrid. So like all the distinct places that enterprises are trying to make sense of and operationalize today. So it's just a really neat intersection of where we sort of came from is network practitioners, and then some of us that have upskilled in cloud, and we've been in the cloud as well, but we're also juggling the AI and the automation. It's just a really cool intersection of all those different areas.
Yeah, to me, what I think the most exciting piece is the reduction in the MT, the mean time to detection or response or innocence even, right? I think we can all agree that solving the problem, actually implementing the fix, is probably 2 or 3% of the effort, right? Replace the optic, call the ISP, revert the config, change the config. Once we've narrowed down the root cause, fixing root causes is relatively straightforward, right? But it's the 30 dashboards and 10 silos of data and communicating with the firewall team and the load balancer team and the change management team. How do we find out why this fire, what started the fire? Putting out a fire is pretty easy. You come over and you throw a bucket of water on it, right? But finding the source of the fire and what caused the fire, was it a spark? Was this intentional? Who knows, right? I think that Selector's using AI for what AI is good at. Let's throw a bunch of data at the machine learning and normalize it and structure it in a way that we can get insights that human capacity just can't do. And it's not humans' fault, right? If we look at the curve of How many devices does everyone on Earth have right now? 6, 7 devices now are on the network per user, right? Think of and then the application sprawl. It used to be email, maybe the critical application of the company, payroll, a handful of apps in an enterprise. Everything has exploded. And the only thing we can't do is just throw more people at it. Like, I don't think there's a calculus that says, okay, I've added 3 new buildings to my campus, each with 4 floors of access layer. I need 2 new operators. Like, I don't think there's a calculus there that just scales people to technology, right?
Yeah, you can't scale it linearly, because if you did, there wouldn't be enough people on the planet to support all the technology that we've deployed today, right? And I think sometimes we forget, and I'm going to go in the Wayback Machine here, but if you go back to the beginning of human civilization, we didn't blame or accuse people for not being strong enough when we invented a lever, right? A lever is a piece of technology that allows you to lift and move more than you can by yourself. This is the march of technology through time. And I'm always puzzled when we're like, oh, there's this new tool. I'm super scared of it. Well, wait, it's a tool. We're going to figure out where it fits. It's going to be a little wonky for a while until we figure it out. But I don't know. I just read an article back from the 80s where folks were very concerned that accountants were going to be subsumed when spreadsheets became the thing. And if you think about how spreadsheets have changed the world, like every organization on the planet like lives and dies in probably a single spreadsheet. But like people still have work to do, right? So really, we just need to figure out the tool, how it works, where it makes sense, where it doesn't, how we can use it to augment human capability and incorporate it into our daily lives. Like I don't understand the craziness.
Yvonne. The other thing is, Yvonne, are there less or more accountants now than in the 80s? Probably more.
That's right.
There's probably more accountants, but what are they not doing? I mean, I sort of come from the edge of that era where there was a floor called accounting, and you went to the 4th floor to deal with the accountants, and it was just rows of people with teletypes and their forms, and they just banged away at numbers,
paper ledgers, right? And you know, and pencils and racks of storage for those paper ledgers, and you know, difficult to find, and you know, do we really think we should have stayed there? And I think 20 years from now, we'll look back at now and go, oh, can you believe that we used to do all this by hand?
Yeah, there's an element to just being excited about all this stuff too, in the sense of like, whenever anything new comes out, I mean, I don't know if this is the right way to look at stuff, but my first inclination is how can I use that to save myself time?
Yep.
And AI came along, and okay, there's a lot of time to educate yourself and come up to speed on things and changing workflows. But for the amount of time I've been able to just save myself in so many different areas, your time is the thing that you can't get back. Your time is the thing that your kids remember that you didn't spend with them. Time is so important. And if you can get some of that back by being more efficient, why wouldn't you want to? Don't be scared of it. Embrace it and let it work for you, and instead of just, you know, fear-mongering around it, really.
Well, and it scales with your own capacity, much like a calculator. So a calculator to the average human being, they do addition, multiplication, division, right? Maybe the odd function. But a calculator in the hands of an extremely powerful mathematician who knows how to use the functions of that calculator, it's even more powerful, right? So that's what I like it is this nonlinear scale of how AI can rise to the challenge, and it's very democratic in that way. Meaning with something like Selector, I can let my CTO ask CTO type questions, or I can have my CCIE ask CCIE type questions, and it can kind of put on the correct face and verbiage and interface with both levels, both ends of that extreme, right? The other thing is I I would not claim to be an expert. Like I'm an enthusiast. I try to make that distinction because I don't know what I'm doing most of the time. I really don't. I read an article about agents, and then I read more articles about agents, and then agents became everything. So I said, I guess I should learn how to write an agent. And what did I do? I opened up ChatGPT. I found some boilerplate code to get started, and I worked with the AI to say, here's my function. What am I doing wrong? Here's the error I'm getting. Here's the goal I'm trying to achieve as an agent that lets me talk to my routers through pyATS. Within 2 hours, I had it working. 2 hours. Now that without AI is probably a 3 to 6 week exercise for me to figure out on my own, and Stack Overflow and Google and this and that. 2 hours I had a working agent from just an idea, just a thought in my head, right?
Well, I was just going to say, I think people would hear that and they could hear it one or two ways. They can hear like, John's so brilliant. He got this thing working in a couple hours. But I think what you're saying, John, is like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I got this thing working in a couple hours with this really cool technology.
Yes.
And I think like the frame of reference of how you hear that is really important. You know, that it's an enabler and a force multiplier.
Yes. Yeah, I really want to stress that. Like, yes, I'm comfortable with Python, but remember, I'm a network engineer, right? I'm a network engineer is what I spent 25 years doing. I have spent the last 6 or 7 years working on Python. But Yvonne, to your point, no, this is not a John's brilliance thing. It really is not. And I really want to dispel that myth. If anyone watches me from a distance, or any of us on this panel from a distance, I'll speak for myself, I guess. I don't want people to think I'm something special or some brilliant mind, or I'm not Nick Russo. I am not. I just grind and grind and grind at it. And I found this new tool called artificial intelligence, generative AI, that really is a co-pilot, an assistant, all those things. It's hard to make it tangible for people who haven't just tried to use it yet. But honestly, let's just say you don't know any Python. You can open up ChatGPT and say, I would like to write a hello world script in Python. Could you help me? And William, to your point about it being an excellent educator and a way to impart knowledge, I would challenge that 99 out of 100 people with ChatGPT, they'll have a hello world app in Python in minutes, right?
Yeah. And you know what you can do on top of that is you can say, okay, I have this hello world script in Python. Okay, ChatGPT, I want to learn how to use functions. So show me how to use this hello world, put it in a function for me. Okay, I actually want to use classes. I want to say more than hello world, but I want to keep it simple because I want to understand how classes are constructed, how object oriented looks in the coding world. Okay, set up a class for me that reads, that I send some text to and then it prints it out, and you can just keep building your knowledge, and that you're helping yourself learn to code. Really,
yeah.
It's an amazing educator because doing that, would be like a few chapters in a book.
Right.
Again, saving yourself time. You can save yourself a ton of time.
Well, and I think, and even like to pull back even out of a coding example, there are so many use cases. I was running a local community event that was providing childcare a few weeks ago, and I needed a childcare registration form. I'm a huge fan of Claude. I use Claude and Gemini mostly, but I went to Claude and said, I need a childcare registration form for my event. 30 seconds later, I had a form. It wasn't exactly right. I'm like, oh, well, add these fields, remove those fields. I don't need to know both parents' information. But in 2 minutes, I had, and this is with the free tier, I had a registration form that I could copy and paste in a Google Doc, apply my template, and I'm done. Like I don't feel diminished because I didn't sit down and think of, okay, what are all the things I need to collect in this form? How should I structure it? What order do I put it in? What categories do I need? Right. And I said something like, we need to be sure we ask about food allergies. And and it formatted a nice sentence about that. Like, and I just didn't have to formulate all of that. Right. And that's a very basic example. So, and like, I would recommend anybody, sign up for a free tier for one and start asking it questions. And then ask the same questions to another LLM because they are different. And I think that's where the work you're doing, John, comes in, is like, how do we take this technology and tune it to the networking space for enterprise customers in a way that it's going to be most helpful?
Yeah, no, and it feels like a cheat code. It feels like a life cheat code right now. I think we're all still adjusting to this. I'd even thought of it from a morality perspective. Right? Is what I'm doing immoral here? Saying, look, I need some copy, right? Or I want this email, or who knows, whatever the use case is. I don't think there is. I think it's a new tool, provided we're using it ethically and not doing deep fakes or gaming the system, or right. Like, there is ethical boundaries that we should respect. But it has changed my day-to-day life. It really has. And like you said, it doesn't have to be some complex coding thing. It could be a form. I use it to help me post, like if I make a YouTube video, I hate writing the descriptions. I hate writing readme files. I'll write all this code and then I'll be like, oh, now I got to document it. What packages need to be pip installed, how to install it, how to run the Docker, blah, blah, blah. I'll paste my code in and say, I need a README file for this code. Here's the pip packages that I pip installed. Please make me an easy to consume README file for the GitHub repository. Boom, markdown, away you go, right? Move on with more valuable things. It's funny, the cartoon from Rick and Morty, right? What's my purpose? And the robot asking what his purpose is to do all of the tedium that John doesn't want to do in a day, right? And the robot's disappointed that that's its purpose in life. Is even little things like I'll write some code in Python and then realize I should probably do a try except and do some error handling and clean this up a little bit. I don't do that anymore. Here's my working function, ChatGPT. Can you clean this up and make it a try except with some error handling or whatever? There's your new function. Away you go, right?
That's awesome. That's you both mentioned a lot of awesome things there. And Rick and Morty, I never watched that show, but there's one clip that was going around a few years ago where it's, I think it's his sister. She's like, they're like talking about carpe diem, and she's like, losers look stuff up while the rest of us are carping all those diems. And, that always used to crack me up. But one thing Yvonne said that just kind of like, something Yvonne and I have actually been talking about, a lot lately, is how the cloud era sort of made like hardware like not cool. Like, this stuff is cool. It's dated technology, even though it kind of runs everything we're working on, but AI is kind of swinging that pendulum back in the hardware lane a little bit in the data center, and enterprises are again having to make some decisions on how, what their future is going to look like. And of course, balance is always critical. It's never like all one way or all the other. We work in technology, right? It's never that way. But do you have, I'd love to hear both of your thoughts actually on this shifting landscape on how, if hardware is going to become prevalent and more of a focus in enterprise in the future.
Well, I think there's some calculus enterprises will need to do, and I think this is an accountant exercise before it's a technology exercise, to figure out, if I ran this AI workload in the cloud, what would that cost me? If I had to procure the hardware and assemble it and support it and roll my own, what would that cost me? I don't think either is cheap. I don't think either is going to be inexpensive. However, I really do see in the future of the data center, those are my AI rows, or those 3 racks over there is my AI footprint with GPUs, and then this new backend network to connect all of that stuff through the new, either InfiniBand or Rocky V2, or you had mentioned the Tesla protocol. I think there's an emerging market for this. I think that some it's regulatory. And like, I believe the military and the governments around the world, healthcare institutions, insurance companies, the stock market. I mean, manufacturing. Everyone wants artificial intelligence as a capability. How many of those institutions have air gap type policies that the cloud is just simply a no-go, given the sensitivity of our data or what we're working on? It has to stay on-prem, given the nature of the material and the data. So I'm not trying to dodge the question. I do believe that hybrid will probably be the approach moving forward. But yes, the on-prem data center networking expert has a whole lot to learn now, because enterprises are going to start saying, okay, we just bought 10 GPUs. Can you please connect them and give us an AI backbone, right?
Well, and I think what I see also is even at hyperscalers, a lot of the competitive differentiation is no longer going to be the automation or the particular feature set or the new capabilities in software, but the differentiation is going to be, what power do we have in our infrastructure and in the hardware to manage and process the workload. So I think it's true for both on premises and public cloud. And organizations are yes, 100% to what John said about it being an accounting problem. I think there's more work for most organizations to understand what their use cases are and what AI is really going to do for their business. I think there's going to be a place for general purpose AI just for workforce enablement. Help me write my email, help me with this document, help me find these notes from a meeting that I took 6 months ago. There's absolutely a use case there, but I also think like there are going to be purpose built, maybe not models, but prompts and approaches that are going to require something more than what we've in the last couple decades have just been like, just give me the fastest x86 processor that money can buy and let's get on with it. Right? That is what's going away. And the hardware is going to matter at a level that it hasn't.
I love those
in
answers.
The last couple decades.
Those are both great answers. I love it. I'm going to have to build both of those into the video short for this episode. That was great. And one thing too, it seems to me that AI, like we've sort of talked about, like you were talking about, John, it's changes faster than anything I've ever seen since I've been working in tech. We really are still at the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot of sweet startups coming out of the shadows. The bigger tech companies are going in heavy with, making AI a feature for all their existing the product suites they already have. What do you think, like something I've been thinking about, and I know this question, I think it's been tossed around a little bit, but what do you think is like next? And is like AI in the future going to be more new products or more features to existing products that already have, that already solve a specific problem? Do you have any thoughts there? I know it's kind of an ambiguous and vague question.
I think it's a good, thoughtful question. I think AI will become quietly integrated. I don't think that companies are going to benefit any more from announcing their AI capability. We have the new greatest AI thing. People are getting a little worn out. There's a little AI fatigue, I feel, right now. So I don't think they're going to necessarily say our new feature X, Y, or Z is built on the latest model and it's LLM and it's AI. I think all that gobbledygook's going to go away. But I think that our dishwashers, our washers and dryers, our refrigerators, our stoves, our television channels, everything, our automobiles, it's going to silently creep its way into just like the analog to digital, right? I mean, our radios used to have knobs you had to turn to find the analog channel. Now you just hit a button and go to the digital channel, right? Well, what if that AI could detect that you change the radio station every time you hear a certain song? Don't play that song for this person anymore, right? I think it's going to really become ingrained in the fabric of our day-to-day existence without necessarily us realizing it. You can see it sort of, like when you go to the Las Vegas airport, there's a new store in there with no humans. You walk in, you scan your credit card, the cameras and the artificial intelligence and the machine learning detect that you've picked up a bottle of water and a pack of pretzels or whatever, and you just leave, and you're charged accordingly. So I think there's going to be small, slightly convenience-driven improvements in society, but then there's going to be these massive shifts of maybe even how we do our shopping and consuming in public. One thing so I'm a utopian. I believe in a utopian outcome. I really do. Maybe I don't need to say that explicitly given my personality, but I believe in the optimism of artificial intelligence. I read things like, so Bill Gates believes that artificial intelligence is going to reduce the time for human literacy by 18 months. Now imagine that globally and the impact that will have over a generation or two if human beings are literate by age 2, because we give them an iPad with a Gen AI and the nature of them asking questions, why, and the AI just keeps feeding them answers, that's building up their literacy, right? The other thing, just on that point, I know a lot of people are worried, like parents, I don't have any kids, so I don't have this dilemma at home. But I asked some families, are you letting your kids play? Well, some of them are all in. Oh yeah, I just give them ChatGPT and the iPad and away they go, right? Whereas others are very reluctant. They're trying to insulate their children from this, right? So it's going to have some societal impacts in the next few years as it rolls out. Yvonne, what do you think?
Yeah, well, so I was just thinking as you were talking, first of all, I'm all in on the optimism. Like I wrote a whole article this year about how optimists are the people who get things done. So props to you for that. All in on that. I have 4 children ranging in ages from like 25 to 9. So we run the gamut, but also 3 of my kids are dyslexic. And I think about the tools that could be available to my children, especially in those elementary years when reading is so hard. And right now, like my kids have had a human reader in those elementary years to help them with exams and help them because they cognitively know the information, but they can't process the written information. Now with my kiddos, all of the ones that have made it, like by the time they get to middle school, they've figured out the strategies. I've got well, she's in high school now, but she's a phenomenal reader now, even as a dyslexic. But I think about the ability to meet those people where they are and help them overcome some of the, their brain works differently as it relates to the written text. There's nothing wrong with them. They just think differently. And you think of all the different, neurodivergent qualities of folks and how we could use AI to help there. Now, what I will say, I think we as a society are just now learning the impacts of social media on young and developing minds. And I think we need to be a little more conservative there until we figure it out. That's my approach, right? But because I think social media has been harmful in ways we didn't imagine.
Right.
So I think we need to be careful. At the same time, I think we need to find the good and amplify that and just be sure we put guardrails around where there are risks and challenges. I don't think taking an approach where we just like lock it in a corner and pretend like it's not there,
Right.
is productive in the long term. So
Well, I'm hoping it even has an impact on, let's say loneliness, human loneliness and companionship. You can quite literally have a conversation with AI and become almost friendly with it, right? So people that are on the fringe elements of society, people that need help, I think it can be there to help them as well. And it's 24/7. It doesn't get tired. It doesn't judge you. It doesn't have human, it's not going to make assumptions of you as a human because it's an artificial intelligence, right? I know we're getting into the world of movies and like Her and things like that, but I don't think that that's too far off. Digital partners, let's call them, right, or girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever. That's not what I'm particularly interested in about AI. I love to latch on to the positive real world implementations. So one thing I'll mention just before we leave AI, there was two separate studies done, one in the University of China and one in the University of Texas, about seismic data. And AI, even today's generation of AI, is predicting earthquakes with up to 70% accuracy. Now imagine the lives that could be saved. Imagine if we could have known about the earthquake that caused the Fukushima meltdown. If we had days of advance notice because AI says, listen, next Tuesday, a 7.9 magnitude is going to hit, and it's going to hit here. Like, we are really talking about saving human lives at this point with a tool that started as a lever, like you had mentioned, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and when you think about AI is really like a lot of probabilities, but if you think about the human element of trying to work up and mock up those probabilities versus something that has instant access and can think so much faster and come to conclusions so much quicker across all these categories, and closing that gap even further for natural disasters and things like that is just amazing to think about some of the future applications there. So I guess we've got to get to the book before we run out of time. I just looked at the time. I can't believe we've already talked this long. Kind of crazy, but someone has a new book. So you and Dan Wade have released Cisco pyATS network test and automation solution, to which you were kind enough to send out copies to some of the community, and us co-presenting at some automation, or not co-presenting, but presenting at some of the same conferences in the past, and you were kind enough to send me a copy. And first of all, I've read most of the book. One thing in particular that I thought was just awesome, what makes it a really good read, especially for network engineering types, is that it really goes into principles and patterns and not just how to use some framework. Here's an example. And I really loved, actually, I think my favorite chapter so far is actually the first chapter, the introduction chapter, the foundations of net DevOps, because it really gives a great summary and provides almost like a carrot on a stick as to the why you would want to do some of these things. And even comparing it to traditional network ops, drawing parallels. Do you think there's still some hesitancy for the traditional network engineering community to jump into, and really any sort of coding, let alone testing we're talking here? What do you think?
I've been saying for 10 years that in the next 2 to 3 years, that's the only way things are going to be done. So I've been wrong for about 10 years thinking that automation, no, next year it's like the Linux on the desktop, right? No, next year, I'm telling you, everything's going to shift to programming and automation. So I don't know why. I know there's been other people have spoken at this at length. And I think it's generational. So like when I was studying for my NA and NP and things like that, there wasn't anything except maybe a little bit on netconf about programming, or there certainly wasn't any Python. But if we jump ahead to, when DevNet Associate came out, Susie Wee's announcement, I think it was 2016, I want to say. 2015 or 2016, DevNet Associate comes out. We're still about half a generation away from the people that came up with DevNet Associate and CCNA having automation in it as being our juniors and senior network operators. I do think it's just a matter of time until we all shift to pure automated type things. I think there's also some misconceptions that if you're too big at scale, automation can't help you. And if you're not big enough at scale, automation can't help you. That there's some sweet spot for the size of a network that is, ideally automated. But that's why I've been writing the books. That's why I wrote the Ansible book. That's why I wrote the pyATS book. I'm just trying to give people more materials to draw from. But I'd love to hear your opinions as to why you think everyone, why it's not the de facto way of running, let's say, networks, meaning programming and automation. I'd love to know, why you think we're still dragging our feet on this.
Do you want to go first, Yvonne? Do you have any good takes here?
Well, I have some, but I wanted to give you a chance. I'll say my 2 cents, but you're closer to this than I am. I think some of it is just networks have a long tail from a technology standpoint. Like you put one in, it works the way that it works. It does what we need it to. And I think we have, still, again, like you were saying, John, generations of folks who are trained in a particular way, who really had this clear delineation in their mind between infrastructure and data center operators and engineers and developers. And the world has changed, but those mindsets have not. And so I wholeheartedly agree. I think there's more that vendors could do to help, but I think like it's really taken a decade to even get vendors to understand the problem
Right.
and begin to modify the technology to make it feasible for somebody who's not a developer in their core mindset, right? So I think
Right.
it's just taking a long time for especially the on-premises industry to build frameworks that make sense. But William, like I said, you're closer to this, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
But Yvonne, to your point, the number one thing that I hear is, no, I went into networks because I did not want to know coding. I did not
Right.
want to learn programming. That's why I specifically chose networks, right? But
Yeah.
William, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Oh, it's funny. I'll give a real life story here. I hope this person listens to this because he would get a chuckle out of it. So I work with someone over the years that is, I'd say a lot of times, like the network engineer, like the really good network engineers that I've worked with in the past, tend to be some of the more opinionated and stubborn to say, okay, we want to do something different. We may not understand it, but we want to try it. It might not be such a terrible idea. But I work with this person over the years that was like, I don't want to say he was anti-automation, but he probably was anti-automation, come to think of it.
You're trying to be nice, but
Trying to be nice, but I slowly, like, this person was also showed some glimpses of like wanting to learn new things. And when cloud started becoming like a bigger part of his role and understanding and building things in the cloud, I had put together an environment for him where I built basically a whole pre-canned proof of concept, essentially. And I had built this actually with Python using, some of the SDKs across the cloud providers and then our API, and then also with Terraform. There's, more than one way to do all this, which is what makes it cool. So I remember he ran this and I got it, I did some screen sharing with him and he ran it on his own operating system and saw everything come up. And I could just see the wheels turning in his head. And he's like, you know what? I can see why you are so hyped about this kind of stuff. Well, this slowly turned into a thing of like, hey, would you mind sitting with me and showing me how to set up the tools? Like you use this fancy text editor with all these colors that make this autocomplete. How do you set all that stuff up? So we went through, we set up VS Code. We set up, I gave him a really quick brain dump on Git, using Git to the context of what he was using it for. And this, we did several of these sessions over like 3 to 4 months. And then next thing I know, he's like just been on fire for this stuff. He uses it for like everything. And he's just like, I just saved myself so much time. Why didn't I take that first step? He's like, I just thought all this stuff was worthless. Like I thought it was, blah, 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 blah. And it wasn't going to be for me. And I was scared, like all these different things. But, once he took that step and started doing it, and it just opened up a new world, opened up many new things to learn, saved him time, upskilling him on his resume. There was just so many different benefits. But that first little step was the hardest one to take, to not even wanting to run it on his machine and wanting me to just run it, to now he's like,
writing his own.
Practically could probably teach a course at this point because he's been so on fire with it. So I don't know. I feel like we can be, I know I'm that way and I try to push that out of the way. So when new things come out, some of the things out there, I'm like, really, is this going to be a thing, but then you've just got to be open to things. You have to be open to learning, and you have to be open to optimization and where the industry's going and, what is really happening around you. If you don't understand what's happening in all the different adjacent areas of the technical sphere that interact with yours, you're going to miss out on a lot. And it's just going to be a net negative for you, I think, long term.
Now, I don't hold it against anyone who has not embraced automation or started their own personal journey. And I think there's some reasons that are perfectly valid. I'm not going to make any more money if I do this. It's not going to lead to a promotion. It's going to lead to more work. I can understand the pessimism sometimes surrounding automation. Why? I'm going to learn this whole new thing, and what's it going to get? What is in it for me? Right? But I think if you can break through and say, just try it once. It's like food. Humans are funny the way we resist things, right? I'm never eating that. And then you taste a little bite. Holy cow, is that ever good? To the point that you start making it at home because you enjoy it so much, right? I think there's a lot similar with new tools and technologies. Like you said, being open-minded is a key, and being mindful. So, like, to me, the best error message that I can get is a new error message, right? It means that something is different. Like if I change the line of code and the error used to say 404 and now it says 300, that's progress.
I'm getting closer. Yeah.
I'm getting closer. I've affected change, right? So I think that I want to encourage, again, the optimism and the positivity. I don't judge anyone who hasn't picked it up yet. But like you said in your anecdote, William, once people have seen the promise and seen what they will benefit from doing it this way, I haven't met anyone that said, I did automation for 2 years and then we ripped it all out and went back to the old way. You don't hear that anecdote very often, that people start automating and decide that it's not for them and rip it out.
Yeah.
Right? I think once the first domino falls, the rest of the things will sort of continue in place.
Well, the reason I first started automating in the first place in my journey earlier on was I worked in an operations center. I just didn't have time. We had so many change orders. We had so much work to do. And that was before REST APIs. That was when SUDS was like your interaction, Perl, Net, SNMP, expect, and all these things. And that's how I was actually able to get a lot of my work done in a 40-hour week. If I didn't have those things at that time, I wouldn't have gotten nearly as much done. I had to do that just to keep up with things and not destroy myself with overwork and over, too many hours. And yeah, I think it's just one of those things where again, time is time. If you have a family, I have 3 kids now, travel, hockey, all these different things that take up so much time. And how do you begin? Like, say your day job's just grinding and 50 hours a week. Where did that extra time come from? And for a lot of folks out there, that extra time is very hard to come up with,
Yeah, I'm childless and we have dogs, and my wife doesn't mind when I spend, some time on the computer. So I don't discount my privilege and the fact that I do have more free time than other people, let's say. But again, and I just to tie it back to AI, I think the reason why some of us have been so successful with AI is because our previous step in our journey was automation, which exposed us to Python, exposed us to Git, exposed us to some different thinking. So I think that helped my personal journey. Embracing artificial intelligence was slightly different Python code, but it was still Python code, right? So people ask, how did I pick it up so fast? Well, because I had been doing network automation since about 2014. And a lot of this was, I'd been exposed to the tools and the techniques.
Thank you so much for coming on. This was a great conversation. It went much longer than I was expecting, but it went by fast.
It just
we'll
means
have to have you on in the future.
It just means I have 100%. To come back.
100%.
Absolutely. Yeah, where can people find you, by the way? Can you just throw in your tags on here, your social media tags?
My X is John_Capobianco. You can find me on LinkedIn. The most automateyournetwork.ca is my homepage, but you can find most of my recent content on my YouTube channel. So I've really tried to make short and long form videos on YouTube as my number one way of imparting or communicating lately. I've sort of fallen off of blogs. if I'm going to write anything, I'd rather write code than blogs, but I don't mind making videos. So that's how you can find me. And William, I'll see you in New York, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
All
it'll be
right.
nice to meet in person.